Well, hi there. My name is Patsy Lambert, and if the Apostle Paul was here to introduce me, he simply tell you that I was one of the many saints at the neighborhood church. Pastor Carey has asked me if I might take a few minutes and help us look a little bit deeper into the first 4 verses of chapter 2 of Philippians. I think by way of review, we would remember that Philippi was a Roman colony. It was near the Aegean Sea and a major trade route, which made it a bustling town, a wealthy town. And I think it's only really fitting that the church at Philippi started in the home of a businesswoman, Lydia, and she was probably wealthy too. Well, anyway, Paul addresses and begins his letter by greeting all the saints at Philippi, and then the believers. And then he doesn't introduce himself as an apostle, but as a servant. I think he sets the tone for chapter 2, which the twin themes of humility and of unity. And he does that by calling everybody, all of the saints. Well, anyway, I'm going to use a PowerPoint, not to be cool, but because I'm a chatterbox and I get distracted. And so I think it'll help us. So I'm going to pull this up. You're probably familiar that there are various translations of the Bible, and each editor of different translations, they insert what we would call subheadings before certain passages, kind of alerting us what we're going to find in those passages and getting our minds ready to read it and understand it. Well, one translation introduced this passage with the title, Christ's Example of Humility. Another one was Imitating Christ's Humility. Another one, the unity through humility. I think you see the pattern here, a theme. But one other one had be like Christ, and I really think I'm going to choose that one because this is a great passage. He's using a lot of common words and common concepts that don't seem very complicated, but when we look at the words that he chooses to use, he doesn't pull any punches. So when we study Paul, it's very easy for us to kind of dissect these long sentences and paragraphs wherever there's a comma or a conjunction like and or but. I would separate those lines so it would look like this. So there's our 4 verses that we're going to look at. But I think we need to remember that before Paul gives any instruction, and we know Paul's going to do that, he has already encouraged the Philippians by telling them that he has great memories of them. He prays for them, which brings him lots of joy. He's confident God will finish his work in them. He considers them ministry partners. What Paul would say that about me, how cool. Yearns with affection to come visit them. He prays for their spiritual growth, and because of their mutual love and care for each other, he writes them to tell them that he is not at all worried about the outcome of his imprisonment, whether he's ready to die, he's ready to live, but he's very happy and content because the gospel is being advanced in his circumstances. But so we kind of wonder, why would Paul start here with this particular, with a question? So well, I'm going to tell you, he's going to tell us what he wants us to do. He's going to explain why, and then how. So Paul's a great teacher, and this would probably stump us a little bit. Why would he say if when he already knows? He's not doubting that these characteristics are in the Philippian believers' lives, but he's asking them, he's kind of provoking them to stop and think, are these evident? Are these there? Because he knows these must be in place in order to do what's really important and grow in the area of loving one another. So I think a better way of wording this would be therefore or for this reason. We know that they have encouragement in Christ, and this encouragement would be the Greek word parakaleo, and it means consolation or comfort or being strengthened. And encouragement in Jesus, he knows how to console. He has been persecuted. He has hurt. He's been lonely. So he's the one that can comfort. And we know that when we think of Jesus, all these things are true. We are encouraged. And this comfort isn't the same thing as the comfort that comes from this encouragement. This is more of this verb has more of a sense of persuasion. And it's because it's being drawn by agape, the love that's God's love for us, not brotherly love, but God's love. And this participation in the Spirit, I don't know if you think about it, but we have the responsibility and the joy of working with the Spirit that lives within, who speaks to us, guides us, directs us, and we have an intimacy with him and a real partnership. That's what the Philippian believers knew, and Paul wanted to encourage them. And we know they had affection and sympathy. They had compassion for Paul's situation. They sent him support, and they tenderness, care, both of you see it happening both ways. Well, this is true. There's no question. He knows that they have all of these things. That's the why. Because you have these, this is what he's telling them. He wants them to complete his joy. Now, this isn't just a maybe, or if you think it might be nice if you would, or if you don't mind. This is a verb that says an imperative verb. It has a sense of urgency, a command. Do this. So he's actually saying, make my joy complete. And that joy being complete would mean that it's overflowing to the full. All of these other characteristics are extremely important, but not if we don't have love for one another. We know that that's the key. So anyway, he says we do that by being of the same mind. And that's not putting your intellect at the door and leaving our individual thoughts and who we are, but it's being we all have the same common focus of God, wanting to glorify God. And that requires us, it's hard, but it requires us to be agreeable, to be cooperative with one another. And because in 1 Corinthians 12, we know there's a long list of the variety of gifts. We're all different in our passions, in our talents, the things that God has called us to do, but we are to be like-minded in that we're all pursuing the same thing of glorifying God. And this same love, this is the love that the world knows who we are because of the way we love one another. I think this next line is a little more frightening to me because full accord, are you ready for this? And one mind means to be in unanimous agreement. And it's kind of like a body. We all do different parts, but we all work together. And the beauty of Christ's body is being unanimously agreeing on the things that we're focusing on. So we really do. Well, here's the key. How do we do that? Well, he says how, and it's by not doing something, and it's doing nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. And those sound pretty common. We know what ambition is, seems okay, and conceit, but these words, the punch he wants us to hear is this is a self-promoting, putting ourselves first. It's being fractious or contentious. It's putting yourself first, putting yourself forward. And conceit, well, that's just simply, it sounds gross when you see it described this way, excessive pride. And I really love this word, vainglory. It's old, but it would be extreme vanity. And he's telling us, don't do anything of that, but, or in other words, rather. So you're making a choice. Don't do that, but in humility. And I think too, another very common word, but to be humble means to have a deep sense of one's littleness. I just really like to get a deep sense of one's littleness. In fact, it's the opposite of you owe me. It's not because I owe it to you, but it's that opposite. I'm going to give it to you. And that's what count means. When it says count others more significant than yourselves, it's not counting by numbers. It's recognizing, it's considering, it is just valuing and regarding somebody else more. You're choosing to do that, not because they've earned it. It's the same concept when God says to Abraham that he reckoned to him righteousness. And James refers to that too. But it's a matter of declaring, and you can decide how we're going to think about each other. It goes on to say, let each of you not look only to your own interests. That's not that you have to disregard your interests. Of course, we need to do that, but not only at your own. And I found this interesting. The term interest really isn't in the text. It's more of a this or that. That word is kind of just a filler. It's open-ended. In fact, John Piper, he talks about it. It's things that he really helped give me, flesh out a list for me. He said to look at others' interests would be concerned about their finances or their families, their homes, their health. Well, look at the long list, their successes, and looking at these as well as ours. It makes me think of Matthew 22:39, where it's, the second commandment, to love one another, to our neighbors as we love ourselves. So anyway, that is a mouthful. Even though it's 4 little verses, they're very powerful things that are going to change the world, change our church. So he tells us why we have we have life in Christ, we have encouragement in Christ, we have participation with the Spirit, sympathy and affection for each other. He wants us to complete his joy by having what? The same mind, the same love, through humility, loving each other. So the big concepts, but very doable because of who Jesus is, and it's what's going to make neighborhood church known in our community and by others because of our love for one another and the way we get along. I think in closing, I just would say Philippians is one of those books that we should read every year. It reminds us of the right attitude, what we have to be joyful in, what we have, and what we're called to do. And a little book that has really become endeared to me is a book by Tim Keller. It's only 45 pages long, but it's also a yearly read. If we want to think about less about ourselves and more about others, this little book is a great, great resource. So anyway, God bless you as you continue to study Philippians, and hope to see you Sunday, well, virtually, if not in person. God bless.